Now next, state funeral services for former US President Jimmy Carter will begin later today. His coffin will pass his childhood home before members of his family travel with the motorcade towards Georgia's state capital, Atlanta. Let's talk to the presidential historian, Dr. Laura Ellen-Smith, joining us live here on Sky News. Very good to see you today. Is that normal for a number of days of a funeral service for a former president?
Absolutely. Everything we have seen so far has been in keeping with these sort of sacred traditions, if you will. So immediately, obviously, we saw Biden come out. He took a stop from vacation in St. Croix to make a very personal statement about his relationship with Jimmy Carter. All the living ex-presidents, including obviously incoming President Donald Trump, have equally made some sentiments and condolences to the family. The flag at the White House was taken down to half staff. So we really see these traditions being respected in terms of lying in state and having his body taken to the Capitol before lying in peace in his hometown of Plains, Georgia.
Now, we have to say, many of our viewers watching won't know that much about Jimmy Carter. He was a one-term president, but it had more success or was celebrated perhaps more after he left the White House. What did he do for America, really, and the world?
This is something that's really interesting because Jimmy Carter really disliked the fact that his legacy became, unusually, as you said, that his post-presidency was more successful. And of course, he had the longest post-presidency, 50 years. He lived to 100, than other presidents. It's partly because even as president, he was so focused on humanitarian causes. The problem with that is that if you are tasked with leading the nation's foreign policy, prioritizing humanitarian causes can be very tricky. And he found that, for example, with the Iran hostage crisis, just to name one. So it created this contradiction in U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War. How do you handle highlighting humanitarian concerns, especially in dealing with Russia, the Soviet Union at the time, when you have these other policies and obviously defeated communism at the time to deal with? As a post-president, he got to focus on these causes that were so close to his heart. For example, Habitat for Humanity. He was a huge impact there, but he could do it without the stress of being burdened, if you like, by crafting that successful foreign policy.
And the Camp David Accords was something fairly remarkable at the time.
Well, not even at the time, absolutely, because obviously Egypt had never even recognized Israel up to that point. There have been 30 years of on-off war and conflict. So to bring those two leaders together, to actually have them recognize each other, to actually and maintain that peace, which has stayed, is truly remarkable, especially if we consider it in the current context of Middle East conflict.
How was he seen at home? As we know, he was a one-term president, so Reagan got in the early 80s. So what was the perception of him in the US?
Well, Jimmy Carter came to office really off the rejection, if you like, of any association of the Republicans with Watergate. So he was able to ride that wave into office. But at the same time, he had these crises, both domestic and foreign, the Iran hostage crisis, and then, of course, in terms of domestic crisis, the gas stagflation. He made a speech about malaise, which really didn't go over very well. He was seen as quite weak, unfortunately, and that has sort of haunted him. So when Reagan came along and was able to make this very optimistic and, of course, use his now perhaps famous, infamous line, "Make America Great Again," it really hit home to American voters that, oh, well, this president, Jimmy Carter, doesn't seem to have everything under control, which, historians debate now. They say that in the long term, certainly his environmental impact, having solar panels on the roof of the White House that Reagan got rid of very promptly when he was elected. These sorts of things in the long term, his legacy has risen, but we'll have to see whether that continues.
Just in a quick sentence, how will he be remembered?
I think he'll be remembered more fondly. He'll be remembered as a president who really tried to do his best for the United States at the time, even though every president faced crises that are out of their control. He certainly had best intentions at heart and highlighted some really important causes for America's future.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for your time joining us on Sky News, Dr. Laura Ellen-Smith.